From applause at their meetings and statements about incredible conversations to what is essentially a direct confrontation on the territory of a third country, Putin and Trump continue to raise the stakes and are closer than ever to an open war between the US and Russia. And this is not about the Ukrainian front, but rather about a war in South America that has not yet begun. Thus, Donald Trump, wanting to finally resolve the issue of drug shipments from Venezuela, sent a 16,000-strong military group to its shores. At the same time, according to the Washington Post, the forces include 8 surface warships, a nuclear submarine, and aircraft, including a B-52 strategic bomber and F-35 fighter jets. In addition, the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford, accompanied by 5 escort ships, was sent to the Caribbean Sea.
Currently, about 16,000 American military personnel are concentrated in the Caribbean, including 6,000 Marines. This figure also includes personnel stationed at the base in Puerto Rico, where F-35 fighter jets are currently deployed.
Obviously, realizing that things were getting serious, the president of Venezuela requested military assistance from Russia, China, and Iran. Only Putin responded. He sent a Russian Il-76 military transport aircraft to Caracas.
It is noted that the operator of the Il-76 is the company Aviacon Z2 Trans, which is under sanctions from the US, Canada, and Ukraine due to its ties with Russian military structures, including repeated deliveries of equipment to regions where Wagner PMC mercenaries operate.
Moreover, the flight of the Russian IL took more than 2 days. All this was done in order to bypass the airspace of Western countries and avoid possible cargo inspections. What exactly arrived on board remains unclear for now. However, analysts explain that everything Maduro asked Putin for simply could not be sent due to Russia's growing losses in the war against Ukraine.
According to internal documents of the US government leaked to the Washington Post, Maduro asked Putin to help strengthen Venezuela's air defense system, including the delivery of 14 sets of missiles and the restoration of several Russian Su-30 Mk fighter jets that Venezuela had previously purchased from Russia. And he also said that he wouldn't mind some extra cash, as well as a major overhaul of the engines.
By the way, after Moscow's support, which was obviously announced in advance, Maduro abruptly changed his rhetoric, shifting from endless calls for peace to a clearly more belligerent tone.
If they ever dare to come here lies the most steadfast and greatest shield of our country, the working class. Not a pin will move, and a general insurgent revolutionary strike of workers and peasants will be declared in the streets until power is restored, so that an even more radical revolution can be carried out. Brothers and sisters, take this as an order.
In other words, Venezuela is planning to fight the Americans with Russian weapons. Experts add that many of the modern systems in Maduro's army are simply unknown. Therefore, if high-precision weapons or unmanned systems are used, the personnel will clearly be Russian, which could lead to a direct conflict between the United States and Russia. However, it's clear who would come out the winner even before the fight begins. Russia simply doesn't have any extra weapons. Everything is being used in Ukraine, and there are no reserves either. Nor is there any money. That's why, experts say, Russian assistance to Venezuela is more of a political gesture by the Kremlin, once again trying to bluff and show its fake readiness to confront the United States. However, unlike Russia, the US has sent such a contingent to the region, and with such weaponry, that if a war does break out, its outcome will be decided within the first hours.
Donald Trump's main personal priority is to become the GOAT, the greatest of all time, the most outstanding figure in world history. In this regard, he is neither a peacemaker nor a warmonger. Where peacekeeping efforts and diplomatic initiatives are needed, that's what will be used. But where war is required to achieve the main goal of becoming the greatest statesman of all time, there will be war. All the more so since this does not contradict the peacekeeping concept of peace through strength. Peace through strength, right? Because in order to achieve peace somewhere, well, sometimes you have to fight at least a little.
But Putin's involvement in this small victorious war of Trump's against Maduro could backfire on the bunker dweller. Emboldened by success and irritated by Moscow's behavior, the American leader might start making impulsive decisions that are extremely advantageous for Ukraine. If there's one thing Donald Trump doesn't lack, it's emotionality.
Cancelling the meeting in Budapest, giving the green light for long-range British and French missile strikes on Russian territory, and imposing sanctions on the 2 largest oil companies in the gas station country. Donald Trump has finally seen the light and decided to crush Putin. What is really happening in the White House?
I've always felt that Putin wants everything, not just a part. I think now he's ready for negotiations. We don't want him to get everything.
As soon as the Oval Office gave the green light, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee sprang into action as well. There, they supported 3 legislative initiatives aimed against Russia, which started the war in Ukraine. Among other things, this includes recognizing the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism and the use of frozen assets. However, the Senate also acknowledges that it's not possible to vote on these bills due to the government shutdown. Nevertheless, in just one day, it seems that across the ocean, they've turned their backs on Putin. But as analysts point out, it's too early to award Trump the hero medal. Donald, as before, doesn't want Ukraine to win. He just wants everything to end as soon as possible along the current lines. He wants to pin the badge of a great peacemaker on his lapel and shift all subsequent problems into the hands of the Europeans.
Trump is acting according to his own logic. That is, Ukraine wants peace. It said, yes, we stop at the line of demarcation. So that's it. Ukraine is ready to take the shortest and simplest path. Russia does not want that. So, according to Trump's logic, pressure needs to be put on Russia, which is what happened in the form of these sanctions. At the same time, according to Trump's logic, if tomorrow the Russians say, okay, we're ready to negotiate a ceasefire, they will go to these negotiations and will be ready to lift sanctions and make some other concessions. He hopes that with the help of sanctions, he will be able to reach Putin's reason. He'll say, okay, we're losing, you're losing, let's look for ways to get out of this situation.
Trump, who thinks like a businessman, analysts say, failed to take into account the main thing in Putin's logic. A dictator doesn't care about millions of Russians becoming impoverished or about economic stagnation. He has his own priorities and he is not going to change them, neither under the pressure of a stick nor a carrot.
He lives for war, you understand? He doesn't care at all about the future of the Russian economy or oil prices. There will be money for the front, there will be money for the army, there will be money to recruit soldiers, and those very soldiers will be found. The ones they've been finding for 3-4 years already, they'll find more. That's all he thinks about. And he probably thinks that everything is going great. And as for what might collapse someday, that people will live badly, that there will be no gasoline or something else, well, they'll find gasoline for the tanks and everyone else will just have to walk. That's basically his whole logic. He doesn't feel sorry for anyone, not just Ukrainians. He doesn't feel sorry for Russians either. So really, what is there to be surprised about?
So far, the only one to react to the demonstrative turn across the ocean has been the unpredictable Dmitry Medvedev, whom analysts say isn't worth reacting to at all. On the contrary, not a single word from any official figures. And most likely in Moscow, they'll pretend that everything is going according to plan.
Obviously, they don't have any kind of response yet. Medvedev is playing the role of the bad cop and is rude to Trump. But as we've already seen this year, Putin and Trump don't insult each other. They bow and scrape, they just tease each other a little. That's why I don't think Putin will make any radical statements or insult Trump and say that we're now enemies. He'll probably just say something like, he got a bit carried away, we'll talk, we'll work things out. I don't think we're in for anything like him coming out bursting into tears and saying, that's it, I'm finished, I renounce power, I lost the war, the new sanctions have crushed me.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Will Vladimir Putin be able to roll everything back? And will Trump fall for empty promises and stalling tactics? It's obvious to analysts that unlike the meeting in Anchorage, the US president realized much faster that the desired showdown wasn't going to happen. But it seems the pendulum has swung. According to the media, India and China will be forced to give up Russian black gold.
Trump is disappointed in Putin. Oila officially cancelled the meeting with the Russian president in Budapest and hit Moscow with powerful sanctions.
The president wants to see action, not just talk. I think the president is very motivated by the success of his peace agreement in the Middle East. He wants to achieve the same result here. He wants this war to end. He has been repeating this for 9 months while in office, and he is becoming increasingly frustrated by the lack of progress from both sides in this war.
Sanctions have been imposed on Russia's largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. The reason is that Moscow has no desire for a ceasefire. For many, this statement only provoked a smirk. The Kremlin's position has long been known. But it seems Trump has only just realized this, and the Russian army played a part in it. As CNN reports, Trump decided to tighten sanctions against Russia after the strike on a kindergarten in Kharkiv. It was this strike that became a turning point for Trump. He decided to act more firmly, though still not as tough as the Ukrainians would like. And the Wall Street Journal confirms this. According to the publication, Trump was offered 3 options for sanctions against Russia. The harshest option targeted Russian industry and the country's top leadership. The middle option targeted Russia's energy sector, while the mildest included limited measures. The American president chose the middle level of severity.
Trump is a player when it comes to business. And when he chose the option that was in the middle, my logic is as follows. He's showing Putin that things could be better or they could be worse. And right now, this is how it is. And that, after all, words have probably run out. In other words, faith in Putin's words has come to an end.
The Russian dictator himself took his usual stance, insisting that Russia doesn't care about the sanctions. He stated that, supposedly, the new sanctions will not significantly affect Russia's economic well-being.
It's an attempt to put pressure on Russia, but no truly self-respecting country and no genuinely self-respecting people ever make any important decisions under pressure.
Trump didn't stay silent in response.
Putin declared that Russia is invulnerable to US sanctions.
I'm glad he thinks so. Let's see in 6 months.
The sanctions are quite serious. This has already affected the relevant purchases of Russian oil, in particular not only by Indian but also by Chinese state-owned oil refining companies. Again, this will affect a large portion of Russia's global oil exports. So, of course, all of this will hit Russian revenues, but naturally, not immediately, not instantly. Trump himself, in fact, hinted that the time frame when these sanctions might start to take effect is approximately 6 months.
With his statement, Putin has effectively rejected the possibility of a ceasefire. At the same time, the Kremlin still insists that a meeting between Putin and Trump could take place in the future.
Neither Trump nor Putin, they've both said this, want to waste time. And they don't want to meet just for the sake of meeting. In order for their meeting to be productive, work needs to be done at the level as defined by the heads of state, of the Russian foreign minister, and the U.S. Secretary of State.
But there's no need to expect it to happen anytime soon. Trump wants, finally, not just to hear but to see actions from Russia, but Putin himself has no intention of doing that. And his reaction to the sanctions is proof of that.
On the one hand, of course, President Vladimir Putin could probably make some concessions or compromises, but after sanctions were imposed on him and his government, making such concessions, in Putin's worldview, would essentially mean showing weakness. That is, it would mean that he was forced to make concessions by threats of sanctions and the imposition of sanctions. And he keeps repeating that sanctions don't work, that they play no role, that sanctions are actually beneficial for Russia and so on. So ideologically, he absolutely cannot accept or truly come to terms with the fact that he was forced into such negotiations by sanctions. That's why it's clear that for now, the question of a meeting between Trump and Putin is not relevant.
But Putin could still be convinced otherwise. The only person who can do that is Xi Jinping. And by pure coincidence, Trump is meeting with him on October 30th.
I think that Trump might even try to make use of the influence that Xi Jinping, the president of China, has over Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, as part of his approach. The real question, however, is just how significant and meaningful that influence actually is. Whether Xi can truly affect Putin's decisions or actions remains to be seen. Because I think we tend to exaggerate things here. Like, Xi will say something and Putin will just sit there like a loyal dog and do nothing. No, that's not how it works at all. Completely different mechanisms are at play there. Does China want this war to stop? Of course not. Right now, everything suits them just fine, except for these sanctions, which are annoying them at the moment.
The American sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil are hitting the Chinese oil market. China has already stated that these restrictions supposedly have no basis in international law and were not approved by the UN Security Council. But it's possible that this is exactly the kind of pressure that was needed. Xi Jinping is dissatisfied and may force Putin to take action.